Okay, because I know that I waffle a lot, I'm going to tell you up front what this video will be about. I'll make my main point first, so that if you're one of those monsters who watches 30 seconds of a YouTube video before you leave a mean comment, at least you'll know what I'm going to be talking about. So here it is. Yes, getting sober might mean that you will be a different person when you come out the other side. In fact, you might have to become a different person. You might have to give up a lot of the person that you thought you were in order to maintain sobriety. Let me explain. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, I am an idiot. Forgot the intro. Welcome to Bat Country. Oh, this lighting is dreadful. Too much sunlight, isn't that weird? Isn't that a weird problem to have? I hate filming in natural light. Anyway, so the problem is that a lot of us who grew up slightly uncertain about our identity made alcohol our identity. And I think that's true of people from all demographics and all cultural context, regardless of age or gender. You might hear a lot of us in recovery say some variation of, I drank to fit in. I'm one of them, I've said it too. But the more that I think about that sentence, the less true I think it is. I mean, I'm sure it is true of me, but it's not the whole truth. It's a little bit like the phrase, it is what it is, which is called a conversation stopper. It is what it is one of those sentences that's designed to just stop the conversation and invites no further questions or interrogation. And once you've spotted that, once you've been made aware that it is what it is specifically designed to stop conversations, you'll never unsee it. And anytime anyone says it to you, it will grate on you like it does on me. I drank to fit in is kind of like that. It's one of those things that sounds very honest and very accountable, but in reality, the purpose of that phrase is to prevent people from exploring it further. In order to make a connection between issues related to identity and to alcoholism, I need to first kind of lay out the case that is true. I need to defend my argument slightly. So let's consider the biggest reasons people generally give to explain their heavy drinking and how that can be related back to our identity. Now, social pressure, or the pressure to fit in, peer pressure, is one of the biggest reasons people give for why their drinking has got out of control. And since this video is largely about that, I'll return to this point later in detail. Loneliness and isolation. This is another big reason often given for periods of very heavy drinking. But as I discussed in an excruciatingly detailed video about loneliness a little while ago, a lot of my own isolation and loneliness was ultimately the result of low self-worth. I didn't feel like I deserved to be around other people. And then I resented them for it. I wanted to be lonely and then I blamed them for my loneliness. And if you are willing to tolerate the idea that loneliness can be the product of low self-worth, then I think you have to also tolerate the idea that low self-worth is an identity issue, an issue of identity. Let me put it like this. When I'm saying low self-worth, I'm using it in a kind of clinically there. It's a euphemism. What I actually mean when I say low self-worth is self-hatred. Alcoholics often hate themselves. And if you hate yourself, that is unambiguously an issue of identity. You hate your identity. That is what your self is. You dislike your own identity, so you push people away and you drink rather than face up to that dislike of yourself. Stress is another common reason given by alcoholics. We drink to relieve some kind of stress. And it might be a bit of a stretch for me to say that stress is an issue of identity, but I'm going to take a run at it anyway, see if I get somewhere with it. Think of it like this. Stress can come from a number of different things: work or relationships or social pressures or politics and beliefs or conflict or whatever. All of those things and an infinite amount of other things all create stress. Now, you'll notice that people who are effective in stressful situations also tend to be people who are very confident in their identity. There's a direct line there. And people who are ineffective in stressful situations tend to be people who have a more difficult relationship with their identity. People who are bad in stressful situations tend to be people who are less secure in themselves. You'd agree with that, right? Perhaps they're, neurodivergent, or they're caught between cultures, or they're not sure about the beliefs that define them, or whatever it is. Not fully secure in their own identity. And therefore they're affected very negatively by stress. And that alone, that fact that people who are very confident in their identity handle stress better, and people who are insecure in their identity handle stress worse and are more likely to become alcoholics, should tell you at least that there is a correlation between identity and stress. And when a person is not confident in their identity, they're not exactly sure who they are or where they belong. And that creates a conflict or a dissonance. And that often leads us to drink. Because in periods of stress, that dissonance, that you're not who you're presenting yourself as, is more likely to be revealed. In a stressful situation, your underlying kind of true colours, for lack of a better word, are more likely to be exposed. And that's terrifying for people who are insecure about their identity. So while something as innocuous as like work stress, or other kinds of like very ordinary stress, life pressures, might not initially sound like issues of identity, turning to alcohol might be a way to kind of cover up the fact that we feel inadequate in the face of the task at hand or whatever is causing the stress. In other words, it's a challenge to the way that we wish to be perceived, and that is absolutely an issue of identity. Another reason why people drink is emotional pain. We drink to numb the feeling of emotional pain. Feelings of anxiety and depression or grief. Anxiety is a pretty straightforward one to link to issues of identity, because fundamentally, anxiety is a dissonance between who we are and who we think we should be. Anxiety is the product of uncertainty and fear of judgment or rejection. And the same is true of depression in a lot of ways. Depression is the feeling of worthlessness or hopelessness, of being a flawed person. Depression is not so much feeling bad, but feeling that you are bad. And that is unequivocally a question of identity. Grief is a little bit trickier to make a connection with identity, but again, I'm going to have a go at it because I think there's a way in. I see it like this. Grief reshapes who we are. Some of the thoughts that we experience in grief are absolutely related to our identity, our sense of security in ourself. Questions like, what does this loss mean for me? How do I continue without this person in my life? Who am I without them? Those all sound like identity questions to me. And when you love someone deeply enough to grieve for them, I think it means that your identity is so intrinsically interwoven with theirs that you lose a big part of yourself when you lose them. And again, these are issues related to identity. Now, this theory, this idea that alcoholism and issues of identity are very closely linked, is very much a work in progress. I have more questions than answers. And I suspect you might not be fully convinced by this point. I don't blame you. But I hope I've at least presented some food for thought there, because it's going to form the basis of the next thing we talk about, which is the I drink to fit in. But I would really welcome some examples, or anybody who wishes to talk about their experience of drinking as a result of a conflict within their own identity. Leave it in the comments. I'll try to build out my argument a little bit better than I just did for another time. Or even if you completely disagree with me that alcohol is related to issues of struggling with identity, I'd like to hear opposite opinions too. With all that said, let's return to the idea of fitting in, because for me that is the clearest example of how alcohol and identity intersect. So, as I kind of touched on, most of us who say that we drink to fit in just kind of stop at the end of that sentence, don't we? We don't take it any further, and we don't ask any of the necessary follow-up questions. But what drinking to fit in implies is that you don't feel like you fit in, right? And that's not about alcohol at all. That is just purely an issue of identity. You feel like your identity does not match up to the identities of those around you. The idea of fitting in is unambiguously a question about identity. Now hold that thought in your head, because it will have an impact on everything that I'm about to say. Why is it important? Why am I even talking about this? Well, it's because for those of us who believe that we started drinking to fit in, which I believe is true of me, examining that idea a little bit closer gives us a better understanding of our own identity. And it helps to lead to a more sustainable type of sobriety. Understanding your own identity will just do that. Examining your own reasons for drinking will just make you more and more bulletproof in sobriety. But this one in particular, because when we say, I drink to fit in, we just don't stop to think like, well, why did I want to fit in? Why didn't I fit in? You have to ask yourself why you feel like you don't fit in. Where does that come from? Figure that out, and everything else will follow. So most of us who have identified a problem with our drinking as adults usually started drinking quite young, and started drinking at times when we were very sensitive to social pressure and peer pressure. A lot of us, I'm talking about myself really, but I know that I can extrapolate this out, and will probably be true of a lot of you watching, that we were extremely nervous about getting left out of things, of feeling outside the group. We just wanted to belong to something, to feel connection with anyone. We sought connection and we sought belonging anywhere we could find it, even if it didn't really suit us. We kind of glommed onto social groups. We started drinking when we were seeking an identity for ourselves, trying to figure out what our identity was. And unfortunately for us, a lot of us, alcohol was a shortcut to that. Or at least it made kind of fitting in easier. When I was 15, I used to get invited to house parties for the simple reason that I could drink 330 milliliters of vodka, one of the small bottles, bigger than a shooter but smaller than a liter. I could drink one of those in about 4 seconds. And that was it. I went to parties because I could drink vodka fast. What was the point of that? What kind of company would I be after I've done that? I wasn't fun for anybody after that. It wasn't fun for me, and it wasn't fun for the people cleaning up my puke off their parents' carpet. What was the point? But for me, it got me in the door. It got me in the room with people. For a while, for those 4 seconds, I suppose, I felt like I belonged there. That became my identity. In my search for an identity, I found alcohol, and that became my identity. Sometimes now I'm 40, I wonder how different my life might have been if I had dedicated myself to something useful instead of just pouring hard liquor down my throat neat for the amusement of my shitty friends. What if I had dedicated myself in the same way to art or to science? And there's no doubt that quite young I was good at drinking, in inverted commas, and I wonder if, like, with the same level of commitment, I could have been good at something that actually mattered. Well, we don't learn these things until it's far too late, do we? In those formative years, it is far easier to say, I will take a drink, than it is to do any kind of introspection. It's easier to say, I'll have a drink, than it is to say, I am awkward. I am socially awkward. It's easier to just take a drink. And in adulthood, it's easier to say, I drink to fit in, than it is to say, I drink because I don't really know who I am. Because that's the truth beneath the phrase, I drink to fit in, isn't it? That's the subtext, is I don't really know who I am. There's someone in my emails right now. I asked permission to talk about this on the channel, and he said yes. He's a guy my own age who's a social alcoholic. Goes out and gets drunk socially. He gets blackout drunk every time he goes out, and he goes out all the time. No, that's not like me. By the end of my drinking, I was very much an isolating, curtains closed, electricity has been cut off kind of alcoholic. But I went through this stage a little bit. The stage of like being out and socializing and getting hammered and getting blackout drunk night after night, even though you're out with people and you're out doing things. That's what this guy is like. And I mentioned him and was partially inspired to do this video because of my interaction with him. Because he's facing a really tough battle to get sober. He keeps trying, stopping and starting. But the problem that he's facing is the opposite one to mine. Mine was, I need to quit drinking because it's ruining my life. It's stopping me from having a life. His concern is that if he gets sober, he will no longer have a life. Every time he goes out, he gets drunk. And perhaps you can handle that for a period in your early 20s. But by 40, the wheels are starting to fall off, you know. And you just can't do that shit anymore. It's not sustainable after 40. After about 32 for most of us. And the reason his problem is going to be so hard for him is because for the last 20 years, that social drinking has been his whole identity. It's all he knows. Going out and getting hammered with his friends. Without going out and getting drunk with his friends, he fears he doesn't have very much. That's all he knows. He said to me that he worries he will be a different person if he gets sober. And he doesn't know if he'll be fun anymore. He says he wants to quit, but sobriety isn't appealing either. And he asked me if he has to change his whole identity in order to get sober. And I'm going to tell you what I told him, in kind of the same tone that I told him. And if his circumstances sound anything like yours, which is that you are approaching middle-age social alcoholic who's having trouble quitting, I want you to listen to this as if I am talking to you directly too. I'm going to have to take a drink before I do this. If you've spent the last 20 years drinking socially, as an alcoholic, blackout drinking almost every night, or even periodically, and your fear is that you won't be any fun once you get sober, I have bad news for you. You're not any fucking fun now. It's not that you're going to be less fun, it's that you are already no fun. You have become a burden to all those who care about you, who love you, and you've probably noticed they've all started drifting away. I don't blame them. You are not fun. In fact, you're not even having fun. You think you are, but you're not. The truth is, you are wearing a booze-soaked mask. The only reason why you have that vibrant social life is that your friends only invite you out because you make them feel better about their own drinking. You are there, at least I'm not as bad as that guy. That is the identity that you're worried about losing. It's fucking nothing. Just straight up amputate the booze, because the disease is spreading. And your choice now is between maintaining this fucking charade or death. Oh, sorry about that. Got a little heated. It's good to get it out every now and then. The point is, at some point in the search of a sense of identity, which we all go through, we think alcohol makes us interesting to the point that the alcohol becomes our identity. And you need to stop that before it happens. I'm going to take my friend, Sober Strong, as a really good example here. So, Sober Strong, as far as I understand, was not an extreme chronic alcoholic in the way that some of us are. Instead, she was kind of like the drink got on top of her at some point, and she decided to just walk away. But I mention her because she talks about this really well, quite often. A part of her journey through sobriety involved a really, really crucial realization. And it was something like this, that she was never really the huge extrovert that she thought she was, or that she thought that she needed to be in order to be popular. She was in fact using alcohol to cover up the fact that underneath it all, she was actually quite introverted. So when people saw her as this kind of hard-drinking party animal, keeping up with the guys and all of that stuff, it was all a front. And once she dropped the booze, she discovered that she was actually quite introverted underneath all of that. It had been a show for almost all of her adult life. And that's a massive realization. And I have that realization too, the same one. I felt like I was expected to be a big, boozy extrovert. But looking back, I was never that person to start with. That particular kind of popularity mask, it never really suited me to begin with. Should never have put it on. It never fit. All of the partying and the events and the craziness and the desperation to be liked and to be popular, underneath it all, I was a socially awkward, introverted, and quite private person. I just didn't know it until I took off that mask. And now I'm much happier with the identity it revealed underneath. And that's the point I think that I'm trying to make. Sobriety, yeah, there is a chance you might be a different person on the other side once you get through. You might not even recognize yourself. You might have to re-examine your own identity and what it used to be, what you want it to be, and get comfortable with building a new identity without the alcohol. Make friends with the person who was underneath it all this time. Because if alcohol is central to your identity, if that is the thing, if booze is the thing around which you have built your identity, then it's really not worth preserving. You would be better knocking it down and rebuilding it sober. Is that a video? I don't know. It was a difficult one to film. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts, and as always, good luck out there.